All right, well, let's go ahead and get going, and people will join as we go. So, we're going to be talking a little bit about today about interviews, best practices. I am a hiring manager. My name is Barret Blake. I work out of Columbus, Ohio, um, for a company called Fusion Alliance. We're an IT recruiting firm, consulting firm. We do the whole gamut of stuff. Um, just a little bit about me there. There's links to my social media and blog and things like that, and you can reach out if you have any questions after this time. Hopefully, we'll have enough time to get through everything, get through everybody's questions, but we'll see how it goes. And like I say, if we run out of time, feel free to reach out to me afterwards. All right, so let's go ahead and kind of dive into things. So just a quick overview of the agenda. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about types of interviews, kinds of things you might be expecting when you're doing interviews with various tech companies, various types of positions. Then I'll talk a little bit about some best practices for preparing for the interview. And we'll talk about what goes on during the interviews and how you can handle those, things that might come up and things you can expect there. And then a little bit about how to follow up after the interview, um, and just kind of the things that you would want to do after the interview has been completed and following up. And then hopefully, we'll have like I say, some time for questions and answers at the end. So the first thing I want to talk about is preparing for an interview. So there's a number of things that you might do to prepare. What? Apparently, I got my slides out of order. My apologies for that. Oh, no, sorry. I wasn't in the right order. I was talking about interview types first. Sorry. This is the first time I've talked about this subject, so I'm a little rusty on this. So the different kinds of things that you can expect from interviews, different kinds of interviews that you might go through. The first type is kind of a pre-screen. It's generally with an HR person or maybe with a recruiter if you're working with an outside recruiter, or even with a recruiter in the company that you're targeting to interview at. It's generally a quick call, 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, or in person if you happen to be on site, just to kind of get an idea of the kinds of things that you're looking for, the kinds of things that they might have that would be open for you. The next type of interviews you might go through is some kind of assessment. So there's different kinds of assessments. There's a personality assessment. This can be either over the phone, they might be in person, they might give you some application to go out and fill out forms. I've faced all three in my various career choices over the years. And that's a lot of times they're checking to see if you're a fit for their company culture-wise, to see what kind of personality you might display there. It's fairly uncommon to run into that at small and mid-sized companies, but it is fairly common even now still at large companies, although I think it's a trend that's kind of going away. It's something that's not quite as popular as it once was. But there are still, especially as I say, at larger companies who still do that kind of personality assessment. Then there's the technical assessments. Those are the some kind of challenge for you, some kind of coding. It might be in person. They might give you a problem to solve on a whiteboard or on a piece of paper, or they might give you something to take home and create a block of code and then submit it to them. Or they might give you an application that you go out to and you fill in code, and it gives you a number of test questions of various things related to code. It's a fairly common thing for developer positions to have that kind of test assessment, technical assessment, no matter what size of company. Most of the time, I think a lot of times it's done as a whiteboard interview. That's something that I'm not particularly fond of or think that it's all that effective. Technical assessments in general, I think the best way to approach them and the companies that I admire for doing that is the ones where they just talk you through various things. So, they during the interview, you might say, here's the problem. How would you go about solving that? When I do those kinds of technical assessments with potential candidates for my team, I prefer to talk through it. I'm more interested in their problem solving skills than their actual technical knowledge. Technical knowledge can be learned, but the way that people approach things, the way that they they tackle the problems that might come up to against them is something that's far more valuable to me as a hiring manager. But not everybody sees it the same way. A lot of times they're looking for actual technical answers. They want to know that you actually know, how many digits of whatever, a float variable might have, or whatever it might be, some kind of obscure things. And those are things that you're going to run into, and I'm not fond of them. I don't like when companies do that, but it is something that you're probably going to face. Another type of interview that you will face potentially is a panel or round robin kind of thing. It's a couple of different ways that they might do it. Some companies get everybody in a room. I've been in interviews where I've been around the table with as many as 10 or 11 people interviewing me at the same time. Or they might do like one after another. Somebody will talk to you for half an hour, then they'll pass you off to the next person, the next person, the next person. So those kinds of interviews, especially for developer positions, are fairly common. Especially, the kind of the get around in a conference room and a table and have, the various members of the team that you're meeting with will just fire off one question after another, just kind of get a fit for you. A lot of times the purpose behind that is not just to evaluate your technical knowledge and your ability to potentially perform the job that you're interviewing for, but it's also a good way for companies to evaluate your fit in your interaction with other team members. These are the people that you might be working with, so they want to see how you interact with them, how you deal with them, how they interact with you. And it's so a lot of that kind of interview is also trying to see your fit, your personality, how you're going to measure up against the rest of the team. And then the last kind of common interview that you're going to face is a manager interview. Now, they may be maybe a separate interview. They may be part of a panel. They may maybe the first interview that you face, and maybe the last interview that you face. So there's a lot of differences in how the managers will approach it. So just to kind of give you, from my perspective, how I usually handle it, I generally combine all this into one interview. I almost never do more than one interview with a candidate. It's usually just me and one of my senior developers. We'll sit with you for an hour, hour and a half, whether it's virtually or in person. And I think that gives me enough of a feel of a person to be able to make a hiring decision one way or the other. But not everybody sees that way. Sometimes the manager interview is a formality. The manager trusts their team. They trust that everybody can evaluate the candidates themselves, and then they just kind of sign off on the team decision. And sometimes managers are the only decision who really matters. So it's there's no way of really knowing going into it, whether that kind of manager is the kind that's going to trust their team, or whether it's the kind of manager that wants to make the decision themselves and maybe listen to their team or not. So whether it's the first interview or the last interview, it's definitely a very important interview if you have to face that. So next I want to talk a little bit about preparing for the interview. So there's a lot of things that you can do beforehand to get ready for the interview. So the first thing you need to do is kind of review your social media profiles. Are there things on there that are questionable? Are there things that a potentially hiring manager might find offensive? Whether we like it or not, that's part of the world that we live in now. And companies hiring will go out, they will look at your social media profiles. They'll look at your Twitter, they'll look at your Facebook, your LinkedIn profiles, whatever it may be. Anything that they can see about you, they will go out and look. So one of the things to do if you're out there looking for a job is just kind of review what you've got out there and whether or not you think that is something that that people are going to have a problem with. Another thing that people will review social media profiles for is to see if you're posting about the topics that your job's related to. Is it just a personal thing, or are you including work-related tweets? Not necessarily about your company, but about the technologies you're working with. They kind of do that to evaluate maybe your passion for the technology, whether it's something that you enjoy doing. Enjoy doing just at your 8 to 5 job, or is it something that you enjoy all the time? And they kind of take a read of that. And as far as which social media sites to use, that's really up to you. The only one that I would say that you absolutely should use and you should absolutely keep 100% professional is LinkedIn. Every hiring manager I know looks at your LinkedIn profile, and if you don't have one, that's something that might affect you negatively in your job search. So I would say that that's the one thing you should make sure you should have it. You should make sure it's up to date, and that you're keeping it 100% professional. So the next thing is research. Don't go in blind to an interview. Make sure that you have researched the company, research their products. At the very least, go out and look at their website, look at the products that they advertise, the things that they kind of do. If you can find anything out about the specific team that you're interviewing with and the products that they're working on, that's even better. That's sometimes hard to do, obviously, but if you can get that kind of inside scoop and you can speak to those kinds of products, if you can bring in at least enough knowledge to say, hey, I have gone out and looked at that, and I've learned a little bit about the product that you work with here, and maybe have some questions about that product, that goes a long way towards impressing a hiring team. Another thing you should do as far as research is research the company itself. Look at reviews from other people who have worked there, websites like Glassdoor and the equivalent kind of thing, where people will post about the kind of company that they work at. And, you've got to kind of take it with a grain of salt, but a lot of times you can get a feel for a company and whether or not people enjoy working there, whether or not people have problems with managers. You're always going to find people who write negative reviews about a company, but most of the time you can still get a kind of a feel for the company in general, and think about whether or not that's actually somebody that you want to be a part of. So do your research. The next thing is to be presentable. How you present yourself is just as important as the way you speak, the way you your technical skills. Whether you're in person or whether you're interviewing by video conference or phone call. Make sure that you're keeping yourself presentable to their hiring. That doesn't necessarily mean wearing a suit and tie. You can look presentable in a simple shirt or whatever. Make sure your hair's combed. Make sure you are cleaned up. It's just the way you appear is important. Unfortunately, it's still the way people are. We judge people by appearance, and the people that are interviewing you are going to judge you by your appearance. So that's something that's very important as well. And as part of that preparation too, if you're doing a virtual interview where you're on video, make sure that your background is presentable. If you're don't have an area that's not like a cluttered area, maybe find an area where you can sit and have a camera facing a blank wall that you're sitting in front of. That's ideal. But if they can see your background, they can see the area around you is a complete mess, that's going to present negatively as well. Again, it's unfortunate that's the world that we live in, but people do take notice of those kinds of things. Preparing for the technology. So, what are the technologies that were advertised for that job? Can you speak to those technologies? Do you have at least some familiarity with them? Maybe go out and look for common interview questions for that particular technology. For instance, C# is something that I work with most of the time. Do I understand things like async await? Do I understand polymorphism? Do I understand the difference between abstract classes and public classes, private classes? So go out and look and find what people think are the most common interview questions for the technologies that you're going to be working with as part of that job. And if it's not a language or something that you're familiar with, don't try to pretend that you know something. Don't try to make something up. Just maybe go out and study a basic overview so that you can say, hey, I've never worked with C#, but I went and looked at some things, and I've learned a little bit about some of the high level concepts, so I know a little bit about what it is to expect in that kind of language or that kind of technology. The next thing is practice. So practice doing interviews. Do mock interviews, even if you're interviewing yourself. If you can get somebody to help you, that's even better. There are websites out there that will help you prepare for interviews by doing mock interviews and that kind of thing. But practice, practice what some of the most common questions are. Almost a universal question is somebody's going to ask you to introduce yourself. Tell them about yourself. How do you answer that? How do you have something prepared that you can, just kind of rattle off, or you kind of sit there searching for an answer? How do I describe myself? Another very common question is, why do you think you're a good fit for this position? I think that gets asked in almost every interview. Do you have an answer for that? Have you studied enough about the position? Have you compared yourself to the needs for that position enough that you can say, hey, this is why I think I would be a good fit? So there are some fairly common questions out there. Just get out there and practice. Like I say, even if it's just by yourself, look up interview questions and say, how would I answer that? And think about that and prepare yourself for that kind of thing. The next thing is the job details. Have you researched about the job so that you know what to expect going into the interview? By the time you go in for like a technical interview or a round robin interview, by that point you should already know whether it's a full-time or a part-time or a contract position, whether it's what the salary range is, what the offered benefits are, generally speaking. That's all information that really you should have gotten either from the recruiter or from the person that you're first speaking with, whether it's an HR company or the HR team. You should have that information going in. That's not something that you should be just talking about with like a round robin team. You should already have that knowledge. So that, and part of that is you're saving yourself time. If you wait until after the third interview to find out what the salary range is, and then you find it's $40,000 less than what you're expecting, you've wasted your time. So prepare yourself and get those details ahead of time. Other things like, is the job on site or remote? Is it with clients? Is it, what are the day-to-day, well, not necessarily the day-to-day, that's something you would talk about during the interview, but, some of the basics, that's stuff that you should know. So another thing that you should do to prepare yourself is to evaluate yourself. Do you know what your worth is? Is the pay that you're getting right now, is that the market average? Is that a market rate, or are you underselling yourself at the moment? Take the time to find out what the going rates are for that particular technology and experience level and the kind of job that you're going to be interviewing for. Knowing what you're worth ahead of time will help save you a lot of time in the interview and job seeking process, by not wasting your time with things that are not going to fit your needs. Don't settle for what and you have to be honest with yourself and fair with yourself, but don't settle for something just to get by for now. It's worth waiting for the right fit for you if you can. Now, obviously, some of us will be in positions where we can't wait. Whether if you get laid off or whatever it might be, you might have an immediate need and you have to take whatever comes along. But if you have the time to wait, make sure that what you're pursuing is going to meet your needs and it's going to meet what you think you're worth. Right now, in most areas and in most technologies, it's a job seekers market. The going salaries are increasing exponentially almost. What a job would have paid 2 years ago is far less than what's paying now. The salary ranges are going up and up and up. So if you take that time to prepare yourself to get that knowledge, to know what you're worth and what your value is on the market right now, will save you a lot of time and struggle later on. Don't undervalue yourself. You have a worth, and it's important. And kind of in knowing your worth, don't interview just to interview. Don't waste people's time by doing that. some people, like, oh, I just want to go out and do practice interviews. Don't do that with a real company. Tech communities are a close-knit group, and people talk. And, and I've been told by other people, hey, if you see so-and-so applying for your company, skip them, because, half the time they're just going out there to just be out there, to practice the interview process, or to just feel like they're doing something with themselves. And people talk, so don't waste people's time. And then the last thing is on preparation is you need to remember that not only is the company interviewing you, but you are interviewing them as well. So go in there with questions. Prepare a list of questions that you have based on your initial research. I tell people that you should have at least, at minimum, 3 questions that you want to ask when you go into that interview. They don't have to be real detailed or specific, but they should be specific to that company and to the position that you're hiring for, or that you're interviewing for. Don't bring generic questions about a technology or something like that. Maybe say, if a company's working, if they're creating web apps in C# or whatever it is, ask them, how do you implement this, or how is your approach to deployments, or how does this product serve the customer needs? By bringing those questions in, you're demonstrating to the company, to the people that are interviewing you, that this is important to you, that you have taken the time to prepare yourself, that you've learned about them a little bit, and you're going to come off leaving a much better impression with them by the time that you're done. I am taking more time here than I expected, so I'm going to kind of rush through some of these so we can get at least to some questions towards the end here. Okay, so the interview itself, make sure that you're on time. Don't be really early. If it's an on-site interview and you get there 15 minutes early, wait in your car until 5 or 10 minutes. But whatever you do, absolutely do not be late. That is the worst thing that you can do to leave an impression with somebody, is to be late. If it's in person, make sure you go early enough to account for traffic and whatever it is. If it's a video conference, make sure that you've taken the time to make sure that the software is installed, that your computer's working, that your camera's working, that your microphone's working. All that should be set up and tested and verified before the interview time. If you send me an email 5 minutes in saying I'm still trying to get my video working, you're done. I'm not going to interview you. I'm going to skip, because that tells me that you didn't care enough about this to prepare yourself. So make sure you're on time. Turn off your phone. Turn it all the way off. Don't put it on mute. Don't put it on vibrate. Turn it off before you start the interview, and then you can turn it on afterwards. When you're talking to people, make eye contact. Make eye contact. You don't have to stare at them the whole time, but just make sure that you're paying attention to them when they're speaking. If you're answering questions, if you're talking, make sure you're making frequent eye contact. You don't have to look at them the entire time, but make sure that you're focusing on the people that are talking. And that's kind of a hard thing when you're doing a video interview. So some of the things that you can do for that is just the position of a camera is important. Is it at eye level? Is the camera in front and center so that you're facing it all the time? If the camera's off to one side and it's low, then people are going to be looking up your nose from one side the entire time in the interview, and that's not going to leave a good impression. So if you have to find a box to put your laptop up on, if you're using a laptop camera, whatever it may be, make sure that camera's facing you, that you're facing the camera, and that you're eye level. Listen, be an active listener. Demonstrate that you're listening. If a question's not clear, ask them to repeat it. If a question is vague, ask clarifying questions. If you don't understand something, don't make up an answer. Tell them, I'm not familiar with that. I don't know about that. It's perfectly all right to say, I don't know. It's fine. Answer the question that was asked. I can't tell you how many times I will ask a question, or my team members will ask a question and somebody will give an answer that's completely unrelated to it. That tells me you're not listening. That tells me that you don't care. And that tells me that I'm going to skip and I'm going to move on to the next candidate. So make sure that you're listening to the question and you answer the question that was asked. Don't repeat yourself if at all possible. I had one guy a couple weeks ago during an interview. He gave the exact same answer 7 times. I got to the point where I started counting, and he almost word for word the same answer. And they were for different questions. They didn't have anything to do with it half the time. So it tells me he wasn't listening. He didn't prepare himself. It wasn't a good experience for anybody. Make sure you remember to ask those questions. I told you prepare questions, at least 3 questions. Make sure you take the time to ask those questions. Most interviewers, if they're doing a good job, will give you time to ask your questions, usually towards the end of the interview. But make sure that if they're not giving you the time, kind of stick yourself in there and say, hey, I've got a couple questions that are all right if I ask, and go into your questions. Kind of things to avoid, depending on the country that you're in, there are questions that are illegal for them to ask, and questions that are kind of maybe not illegal, but inappropriate for you to ask. Avoid questions about money and benefits and that kind of stuff. That stuff you get worked out later. Stick to the skills. Stick to the things that you're talking about as part of the job. And the one thing that I have to emphasize above all else is be honest. If you don't know something, say I don't know. If you haven't worked with the technology, don't tell me you did. Whatever you do, don't make stuff up. Don't lie. Don't exaggerate. If you were a junior developer, or don't say that you were a senior developer. Whatever it is, don't exaggerate. Don't make stuff up. And then follow up. So as soon as you can after the interview, don't do it in the if you're on site, don't do it in the parking lot. Go somewhere, go home, go back. Find a coffee shop, whatever it is. Take some time to write down your initial thoughts. Within, say, an hour or 2, if possible, so that it's still fresh in your mind, so you're still thinking about it, so that experience is still there in your head. Write down, not only your thoughts of the experience, but also any questions that you might have come up with since then. Send a thank you email or message to the senior-most person that you interviewed with, whether it be the manager or maybe the senior developer or something. Don't blast out messages to everybody that you talk to. It's generally a single note to the hiring manager is the best way to go. Say, hey, thank you for your time. I appreciate it talking about this and this. Use some specific examples in there. I really enjoyed talking about X product or Y product, or this or that. But be gracious, be grateful. Don't be pestering them with how soon you're going to make a decision. It bugs me when people do that. We'll tell you when we tell you, when we make that decision. So whatever you do, don't keep pestering them. If a single thank you email is good enough, and then be patient at that point. If you're working with a recruiter, most of the time the recruiters will ask you to call them after the interview or email them after the interview. So make sure you're including your recruiter if you're working with them with any feedback that you have. Make sure you call them or message them and say, hey, here's what we talked about. Here's what I thought. Here are my impressions. I'm still interested in this position. I'm really interested in this position, or I'm no longer interested. After talking to the company, whatever it might be. It's perfectly acceptable to connect with the people that you talk to on social media. I would stick to LinkedIn. Send a connection request on LinkedIn after the interview. Don't do it immediately. I really would recommend that wait a few hours, wait till the next day or a couple days later, just so they don't think that you're pestering them or desperate or needy. You don't want to come off that way. So a day or 2 later, say, hey, send them a message, connection request on LinkedIn. Say, hey, I enjoyed talking to you. I'm really interested in the things that you guys are doing at your team. That's your company, whatever it may be. Be very professional in that connection. And then, as I said, be patient. Wait for an answer. Don't call them daily. Don't call your recruiter daily. Your recruiter's job is to pester them on your behalf. So if you're working with a recruiter, let them do it. As soon as they have an answer one way or the other, they'll let you know. If you don't hear from the recruiter, within, I would say 3 or 4 days, then you might send a follow-up message. Or if you're not working with a recruiter, then maybe 4 or 5 days afterwards, send a message to the hiring manager, say, hey, again, thank you for your time. I was just wondering if you had any updates or anything like that. And then the last thing is keep looking. Don't sit and wait. After you've gone through an interview, don't sit and wait for an answer from that company. You need to keep yourself out there. You need to keep yourself active and looking, because you never know what might turn up after that. So don't just sit around and wait. So that's kind of what I had. It's the kinds of things that I feel as a hiring manager are important for candidates. And kind of circling back to the one thing that I think is the absolute most important is don't misrepresent yourself. Don't lie. Don't deceive. Don't exaggerate. Be honest in who you are and what you're doing. And that's probably going to get you a lot further than anything else. So yeah, so we have time for a few questions. So let's see here, we've got one. So I see, I think. Sorry, I'm terrible pronunciations.
It's fine. First of all, it's a wonderful session. Thank you so much for giving me your valuable time. I have a question for you, Barret. So
yes.
Basically, right now I have been recruited in one of the MNC. So I'm working as a technical software engineer, for which I was hired for. But initially, when I was in touch with the recruiter told me that there will be 20% of some operational work that you have to do, and apart from that, majorly you will be doing the development part of the project. But after I joined, I realized that there is only very less room for development, and there is more of operation over here. They say that there is a vision which they will be accomplishing to increase the development work in front of in terms of automation. But I don't feel it is happening anytime in near future. So I am thinking to leave the job, but a few of the people are telling me that work for at least 3 months and then look for another job. What is your take on that? Do you think it will be bad for my career progression, because there is a very close network in IT world? So any suggestions on that?
Excuse me. No, I mean, to be honest, I would start looking for something else, but I would be honest, I'd say, talk to the manager or whoever you're working with and say, hey, you know what, you guys told me this one thing, it hasn't turned out to be that way. So I think I might, see if I can find something that's a better fit for what I'm looking for. And you kind of have to be careful with that, because you kind of have to feel how they're going to respond to that. What you got a feel for the company and the people that you're working with. But I definitely, if you really feel that it was not what you were expecting and it's not meeting your expectations or your needs, then yeah, I would not hesitate to go look for something better.
What I've planned is, I've already told my manager that there has been some misunderstandings between me and my recruiter, and he said, yeah, those are the valid things. But I haven't told him that I'm looking for another job outside. I was thinking like maybe once I have some offer letters, I'll crack the news. Would you think that'll be fine, or shall I just upfront tell him that I'll be looking outside, so don't mind?
Yeah, I mean, if it's kind of one of those things where it depends on the manager. I mean, some of them will not react well to that kind of thing, but for me, I would hope that somebody's going to be honest and say, hey, this isn't fitting, this isn't working out for me, I'm going to go look for something else. So that not only are you finding something better for you, but so that they can start looking for somebody who might be a better fit for them as well.
Thank you.
All right, let's see here. Is that Ayush?
Barret, thanks for such an valuable session. Do you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Cool. So basically, I wanted to know that when you go to an interview and there are questions, some of them are that's something that you don't know. So how do you approach this? Do you actually just say simply, I don't know, or you just say like, okay, I don't know, but I would like to come to us. I would like to approach this problem. Like, what do you actually see as a recruiter when you ask a question that a candidate doesn't know?
yeah, I mean, if somebody, if I don't know the answer to something, if it's not something that I'm familiar with, I'll be upfront and say, hey, this is not something I've ever worked with or something I've ever done, so I don't have an answer for you. But if you'd like me to find out an answer, I'd be happy to go and research this and learn more about it. Especially if it's a technology that's part of the job description. Maybe it's Amazon Web Services you've never worked with. Be upfront and say, hey, I've never done anything in AWS, but I'm perfectly willing to go out and learn how to work with AWS and the various features that it has as part of this. So be honest and say, I don't know, I haven't worked with it, but also express that willingness to go out and learn about it. Thomas. Still there? Do you have a question? Thomas L., I think.
Hello?
Yes.
Sorry, my mic was off. Hi, thanks for doing this. I am curious as to if you have any specific advice for people who are self-taught developers that would deviate from the classic people who have CS degree or who even went to a boot camp, and how you'd adjust that process or approach this in a different way.
Yeah, and that's something that's great in our field. Is becoming a college degree is becoming less and less important as far as requirements for a job position. The most difficult part of that is if you don't have any practical experience or work experience, but you are self-taught, you have learned.
Right.
It's one of those things where you kind of have to emphasize some of the things that you have worked on. So if you've done some personal projects, kind of demonstrate and explain about those. Make sure that they're available for people to see or download or whatever it is. I would also recommend for somebody who doesn't have professional work experience, but you have the knowledge, is to go and participate in open source projects, unlike
Okay.
GitHub or other places. Get involved in those so that you can demonstrate, hey, I contributed 5 pull requests to this particular repository, and I did this for this repository and things like that. If you can show that active involvement in the community, even though it's not professional, so to speak,
Sure.
that goes a long way over somebody who says, I just learned how I made a website for my dog,
Right.
kind of thing. So those are generally the best ways. I personally am not a huge fan of boot camps. I know there are some good ones out there, but unfortunately you keep hearing about bad ones that just are kind of certificate mills where they pump stuff out. So if somebody has a boot camp and that's the only thing on their resume, I'm going to pass on them.
Okay.
Unless they can also demonstrate, hey, I've been involved in these communities, I've been doing these things, I'm attending, conferences, I'm participating in the community at large, then that definitely goes a long way towards improving that position.
Great. Is that, I guess, just one follow-up. So like when you talked about the social media, is that something that would also be included in that, like people engagement with, online communities of developers or, in those spaces? Is that something that would be relevant?
Yeah, absolutely. As long as that engagement is positive and you're,
right.
you're participating and contributing, excuse me, to that community in a positive way, then yeah, those can also go a long way towards helping.
Great. Well, thank you.
All right. See here, Raju, maybe. I do apologize for pronunciations. Not sure if you're still on. Raju, Chris. Okay, guess not. Masood. Masood Abed. I'm sorry. Do you still have a question? Not hearing anything. Maybe I'll come back to you in just a second here.
Okay, hold on.
Oh, there you go.
It's my first time using this platform.
Yeah, me too. So I understand completely.
All right. So my question is, I've been looking for, I guess, let's see. I have a database background, database developer, BI in SQL Server world, and I'm trying to upgrade my skills to AWS cloud technology. And I've done some contract position, get into a little bit of experience on it. And I thought that would be enough, but I'm still having a hard time finding a role amidst all these opportunities that are available, and I think most of the people have told me that I don't have enough experience, and I think this is kind of a catch-22 question. So I'm not sure if you can help me kind of change my approach. How do I go about targeting those companies or job roles?
Yeah, I mean, that's a difficult one, especially with the professional tier kind of technologies like AWS and Azure. There's only so much that you can do with the free access and with community involvement.
Okay.
I don't know that I have a good answer for that because it's one of those things where it's hard to get into without the experience, and
Okay.
it's hard to get the experience unless you can get into it. So,
All right, I got you. Yeah, I understand. Oh, one more thing, maybe you can help me. So if I were to want to be a freelancer, I mean, I have some web development skills. How do I go about picking up clients? I think that is always a challenge for me.
to be honest, that's not something that I can really speak to because I've never gone that route.
Okay.
I don't really have any experience with freelancing.
All right, great. Thank you for your time.
All right, Sina?
Yes. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you for the great session. I personally learned a lot. I just have a quick question. I am going to be graduating from my university to get my bachelor's degree in computer science. So as you would know, I'm applying to full-time roles and internships for my field. And one thing that I came around is I see some recruiters and positions been asking for cover letters, and I know that cover letter has to be written to somebody at the company, right? Would you be able to tell me who that letter needs to be written to?
I mean, generally, if there's any kind of question, it's whoever the hiring manager is. If you can find out who that is.
Okay. Even though if I'm not sure if that cover letter is actually going to the hiring manager, I should have their information on the letter, right?
I would, yeah. I mean, I personally, I don't read cover letters as a hiring manager, to be honest.
Oh, okay. So
but some people, a lot of people do. I just, that's something for me. I'm not real interested in what people put in a cover letter.
Okay.
It's purely a personal, decision on the hiring managers. Like I said, some people like that, some people don't. So.
Right. And one more question. So would you say the amount of experience that a candidate should have for the internship should be the same as they would apply to a full-time role at that same company, or it's different for internships and full-time roles?
Generally for internships, I don't think any experience is
required,
expected, or required beyond the educational aspects.
I see.
The whole point of an internship most of the time is to get the experience for somebody who doesn't have any.
Right. And is that the same case about the technical knowledge about the position, or that is a different scenario?
No, I think that would be the same. At least at our company, we don't expect somebody who comes in on an internship to have a whole lot of practical experience.
Right.
Mostly, book learning, kind of, so to speak.
Yeah.
Whether it's from a boot camp or self-learning or college training.
I see. All right.
Yeah,
That's perfect. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for the session. Thank you.
All right. And I'm almost out of time here. I do have a hard stop here in about a minute, so I got time for one more question. Raju?
Yeah, thanks for taking the call. I like when you said don't give interviews just for sake of interviewing. Having said that, do you have any specific recommendation for mock interviews? Any forum or a website or group?
I know there are some websites out there that have like automated mock interview things. I don't know off the top of my head what any of those are. The most useful thing I think of is to get a friend or another student or somebody who's in the same field to sit and do a mock interview with each other in between the two of you, just to ask questions back and forth. Even if you just you look up a list of questions online and just read off that list of questions. Having somebody there face to face kind of gives you a better experience than just if you're looking at yourself in a mirror or something.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I apologize. I don't have any more time for questions today, but feel free to reach out to me by LinkedIn, email, Twitter, whatever it might be, and I'd be happy to answer as many questions as I can. I do know that this session was recorded, and I do believe it will be made available And I will try to get these slides put out on my blog here. Probably have to be this weekend, but I will get the slide deck put out there. I thank everybody for attending today, and I appreciate you being here. I hope it was at least somewhat useful for you.
Thank you.